So, I haven't actually told anyone about this because, well, I think I imagined it. But I've been having nightmares about this, so I guess I just need to get it off my chest. So, I was hauling lumber on 36E between Fortuna, CA and Red Bluff, CA, on my way to the 5S. This was in 95 or 96, right before the coastal lumber industry folded. Route 36 is basically a glorified logging road. It twists through the mountain ranges and goes to one lane several times. Anyway, I got a late start, which was okay, as I like driving at night anyway. It was probably around 10 or 11 at night, I'd say. As I crept up into the mountains, there was a nasty bit of fog, and I rounded a corner, and suddenly there were all these deer just standing in the middle of the road in the fog. It was kind of creepy, just seeing all these deer standing in the fog in the middle of the road, and I'm used to seeing them running across the road, but not just standing there. So I blew my horn, and they all turned and just looked into my headlights, the ears twitching, the buck's antlers casting long twisted shadows into the fog, and I blew my horn again, and they just kind of lazily walked to the side of the road. I idled forward between them, and I looked out of my driver window and saw the bucks and the does warily looking back at me as I drove through them. But that wasn't the creepy part. You see, I reached the peak and I started back down. The fog on the eastern side abated, but as I rounded a corner, I saw a guy walking down the road, down the middle of the oncoming lane, his back to me, and he had shoulder-length black hair, was wet and stringy from the moisture that had been in the air, and he wore a faded blue wool-lined jean jacket, hands in his pockets, and darker jean pants. When my lights hit him, he swerved toward the shoulder of the other lane, giving me room, and then just the most terrifying thing that I've ever experienced happened. I was going maybe 25 or 30 at this point, but as I came up to him, he suddenly bolted right in front of my truck. The last thing I saw was his wide black eyes and his mouth open in a silent type of yell, and a black pit in his white face shining in my headlights before just disappearing under the horizon of my hood. I practically stood on my brakes, the cab and the trailer behind me hopping, and I remember just thinking, holy crap. I hopped out of the cab immediately. I don't remember turning on the flashes, and I ran back behind the truck, and I saw him walking back up the hill, behind the truck, hands in his jacket pockets, his back illuminated by my red lights. And he looked back at me, and he had black eyes and like a black mouth, now grinning toothlessly at me. And then he just ran off into the trees at the edge of the road. I was confused and scared, and I didn't call out. I just got in my cab and I just drove on. I still dream about those wide eyes and that unholy mouth just disappearing under my hood, and I just hope the dream stopped now that I've shared this. I was about 9 at the time, I think, and my mother had just gone up to the UPS store to send a package and leave. There wasn't many people there, so she figured that I could be left in the car for a minute or two. There weren't that many people there, so she figured that I could be left in the car for a minute or two. For setting, I was in the car, windows halfway rolled up, since it was summer and my mother is a smart lady, and it was a fairly empty parking lot. So a lady pulls up in a very high truck with American flag stickers on it, and I wasn't really paying any attention to her until I heard her window roll down. I noticed her out of the corner of my eye, just kind of staring me down, and I glance over at her, discovering her slowly licking her lips. She then starts to speak, and the conversation went a little like this. So the lady said, My, you're a pretty young lady, and I kind of awkwardly say thanks. The lady says, I had a granddaughter who looked just like you, and I said, cool, and then she said, my grandson is actually cooking dinner right now. I came to pick up the final ingredients. And I was like, oh, that's nice, I guess. She said, do you want to come to my house for dinner, and I have a good feeling you'll like it. I say, no thanks, I already ate. And then she says, "I'm just trying to be friendly. Come on, you'll love it." And then I say, "Oh look, there's my mum." My mother walks to the car and the lady says to my mum, "Your daughter's really pretty." And at this point, she just drives off slowly, still staring at me. Her truck follows us for a while until we get inside, and then she just kind of speeds off. And that night, I heard loud tapping noises on my window and footsteps outside. Our neighbours also said that they saw some shady character sneaking around. We never did see her again after that, and after that night, everything stopped, but what the heck was she up to? This happened when I was around 9 or 10. I was staying the night at my friend Catherine's for the first time. We met the summer before and were inseparable ever since. Kat lived in this old 2-story house surrounded by woods and dirt road, and the house itself gave me just an uneasy feeling when I first saw it. The shutters were falling off, the paint on the house seemed to be fading. It was honestly just an old piece of crap now that I think about it. But at the time, I was excited. I remember walking in after I stared at the house for what seemed like 20 minutes, and surprisingly, the inside was a lot nicer than the outside, so I pushed that uneasy feeling down and just shrugged it off as nerves. But one thing I do remember distinctly about the house, though, is the smell. I can't pinpoint it, but it was just different, like walking into a musty room or something. I started to walk around and just explore my surroundings, but I noticed Kat's mum was watching me. I simply smiled, waved, but she just kind of stood there, staring at me wide-eyed. I'd never met her before, but why was she staring at me like that? Suddenly, Kat flew around the corner and tackled me. We both fell and started giggling, and I noticed Kat's mum out of the corner of my eye start to turn around and walk off. And she was gone, just like that. So fast forward a couple of hours, and Kat and I are laying in a beanbag in her room just watching Children of the Corn, which, by the way, was one of my favourite movies at the time. I grew up watching horror movies, mostly Stephen King movies, or any movie my mum was watching at the time. It wasn't her decision, it was mine, because I love the feeling that a good horror movie gives you. Anyway, she felt the same way, and that's why we clicked so much. We were sitting here watching the movie, and suddenly the door opposite us just slams closed. We both jumped, giggled, and brushed it off because, well, we were kids. Until the second time when it creaked open and slammed again, not even seconds after the first time. Now, I'm sitting there staring at this door trying to figure out how the hell is this door opening and closing by itself. In the midst of all of that, the only other person in this house was her mum, which I figured out earlier was just a tad bit creepy. So naturally, I asked her, "You think that it's your mum?" But she just shook her head. I asked, "Are you sure?" again, but she said something that gave me chills and still gives me chills just telling this story. She said, "My mum isn't home, it's just me and you, silly." I just stare at her while she's staring at me, just trying to wrap my head around what she just said. I mean, who leaves their 9-year-old home alone with a good friend in a 2-story house? So I ask her, "Where is your mum?" and she says, "She's at work." I giggled at this point, thinking that she was just trying to trick me because we were watching a horror movie, but she says, "She's at work. She only works for a couple of hours, so she leaves me here because she trusts me." And at this point, I'm just looking at her, and she noticed this look of worry on my face. And she asked, "What's wrong?" I said to her, "If your mum is at work, then who was that lady that was staring at me earlier?" And as I said this, we heard what seemed like footsteps at the time. But thinking about it now, it kind of sounded like shuffling in one spot, above us. And at this point, I'm completely terrified, and every hair on my neck is standing out, and I just want to leave. I start to get up when Kat pulled me back down and asked me if I heard that noise, and I nodded, and it was silent again, until the footsteps were back but louder and faster. We both stared up at the ceiling, and she grabbed my hand, and then she whispered, "This happens every day." I look over at her and can truly see the fear on her face. The footsteps stopped and she looked at me and her face just kind of flushed white. I asked her, is there an attic there? And she pointed upwards towards the ceiling and, well, maybe it's just squirrels or birds, I kept thinking over and over. You ever notice when you're just really quiet that's when you can hear almost everything around you? Imagine if you're sitting in a house with your best friend, alone at 10 years old, and you then hear the giggle of a 3-year-old child. Mind you, she has no younger brothers or sisters, and we were definitely completely alone. Kat was just as scared as I was, and I remember thinking that I just wanted to get out of this house at this point. So I just grab her and I run out the door. I mean, at least we would feel safer and less scared outside the house than we would in it, right? While we were outside, Kat asked me if I wanted to hear a story, pulling my mind back into reality, and I nodded. She said, well, this house used to be a daycare, and there was this lady that would watch the kids, and one day she just locked them in the attic and then hung herself from a rope in the kitchen. Apparently, they all died because the kids were hungry and thirsty and no one found them for months afterwards. And it all happened in this house. Upon hearing this, my heart started to pound and my eyes were wide with fear, and I just looked at her and she said that it was true. I've seen them, the little kids, every day, but I've never seen the lady, but you have earlier. And after she told me this, I don't remember much else. Kat followed me around, begging me to stay, but I just had to go. My stomach felt like knots, and I felt as if I walked into a horror movie myself and just wished this day had never happened. Anyway, I eventually went home, and that was pretty much the end of it. Fast forward a few years later, though, the day was the last day that I'd seen or heard from Kat, and I remember her always coming to play outside at my dad's during the day. I remember what she looked like. I never remember meeting her parents or seeing them out in public. I'm 27 now, and I can't seem to find any proof that she ever existed as well. All my friends that I was friends with then, and I'm still friends with now, even after all these years, they don't know anything about her. I've driven by that house maybe 15 times, and the house definitely exists. So back in the day, I had several odd jobs that required I drive across the country. One was shipping horses, and I drove the truck from barns to shows or vice versa, and the other was working as a road crew for a rock band. Now, I was very, very young at the time, 16 to 20 years old, and for reference, I'm female, short, athletic, definitely the odd one out at a lot of rest stops and gas stations along the major routes, and I'm also tattooed and I had a red mohawk which made me stand out more. Several weird things have happened that I remember, but first I want to say that Navajo Nation is really creepy. Always drove through it at night too. Never meant to plan it that way, but that's always how it happened. Oh, and another creepy place is northern Utah. Totally hills have eyes up there. Anyways, here's the first story. So, I was driving from Galveston, Texas to New Orleans, LA. Galveston had just been hit by the hurricane, and there was a weird serial killer moving through that city, so the vibe had already begun as weird. Just as I crossed the border from Texas to LA, I started to get super tired. It was really late, 3 a.m.-ish I think. Tried to find a gas station to pull over at and rest and fill up, but all of them were closed. So I ended up giving up, pulled into the next one which was closed, parked in the far corner of the lot, killed my car, a convertible Jeep at the time, and laid back my seat to get some sleep. Everything seemed quiet, and there were a few lights from the station that were on 24/7, but I parked far enough away that they couldn't really bother my eyes. So I eventually fall asleep. But I woke up with a start. I'd been dreaming, but I had like this gut instinct to just wake up. And as soon as I did, I immediately saw someone covered in mud, wearing rags, holding a knife, advancing slowly towards my car. He was maybe 5 feet away, moving forward, and my adrenaline kicked in immediately, and I switched the car on at this point. He lets out some guttural growl and then launches towards the car as I'm backing up. I barely miss him as he's grabbing at the vehicle. With the headlights on, I could see that he was covered in sores and the knife was all rusty and weird looking too, and I just sped out of there and didn't sleep again all the way to NOLA. And it freaked me out so badly that I never again slept in my car after that. The idea that he could have been watching me sleep for who knows how long it really got to me. The car was also a convertible, and he could have easily cut his way in. And that image of waking up to some crazy person advancing on me with a knife has also given me nightmares just for many years at this point. So, the second story was hauling horses from Kansas to Tucson, Arizona, driving a big Ford truck, a dually with a small trailer carrying 3 horses. Near Gallup, around 2 a.m., the back inner tire on the passenger side blows out. I pulled off the road and assessed the situation, and there was zero chance that I could change the tire myself given the trailer and dually truck situation. And I'm tired and just weak from exhaustion, so I call a tow company and tried to find a temporary boarding place for the horses. But it's the morning of Easter Sunday and literally no one is open. I'm going through the yellow pages, calling tow company after just tow company, and yes, I'm old, and this is pre-smartphones. Finally, I find a Native American tow company who also has a ranch with boarding for the horses and a truck to come grab the trailer. It was a godsend, but the guy and his wife who ran the company told me to be very, very careful not to leave my truck during the 2-hour drive that it would take for them to arrive. They said this in just such an emphatic way that I began to get really scared. They told me not to open the door for anyone and to just keep the doors locked. No one was really on the road, so I was just confused as to who could really be a threat out here, but I took them seriously and locked my doors and I just waited. Strangely enough, I kept hearing this weird scratching sound on the back panel window of the truck. Like someone was trying to open the small window back there, and a couple of times the truck would sway, which I figured was the horses. But it was pitch black out and there was no wind. I heard a few footsteps, but chalked it up to my imagination at the time, and I was getting scared out there alone and unable to move. Eventually, the nice couple with the tow truck and the other truck to haul the ponies shows up. They immediately and first move me from my cabin to the cabin of their truck, tell me not to move or open the door under any circumstances, and the couple is super fast. Lady deals with the horses, man gets my truck up on the tow bed, and they then drive me to the ranch. After the man drops my truck off at the local shop owned by his cousin, who he says will handle the flat on Monday. Anyways, long story short, this wonderful couple takes care of me and the horses, gets my truck tire fixed, and as I'm ready to leave on Monday afternoon, there's a story on the local news of a woman with a flat tire who was murdered along the same stretch of highway on Sunday evening. She'd been out changing a tire and it just looks like someone murdered her. I asked the couple and they didn't say much other than just to never get out of the car at night along that highway, ever. They said that it was pretty much certain death. They also gave me some bags of pot puree stuff to have burn in my truck cabin for protection, and I felt lucky to find these nice people, to be honest, but they definitely looked out for me and never once did I feel unsafe staying at their house. I was 18 at the time and definitely knew nothing about safety along trucking routes. But from now on, when I drive through that area, I don't stop if I can avoid it. I just load up on gas, check tires in Flagstaff, and I just ride on through to Albuquerque. There's weird stuff out there on the reservations, and I don't pretend to know or want to know what it is. So, 30 years ago, I'm about 13 or 14, and me and an older friend are babysitting for a 6-year-old girl and her younger brother. We had been told that sometimes the girl complains about seeing a ghost man in her bedroom and upstairs at night, and that he comes out through the attic or something. Now, I didn't believe a word of it. The kids are weird and just say weird things. So, we get the kids ready for bed, but they just wouldn't settle. The girl said that she felt scared and that her little brother started crying. She asked if she could sleep in her mum's bed till she got home, and the little brother wanted to go with her, so I tucked them in, told them silly stories, and laughed until they were both tired. Both kids were virtually asleep when we left, door ajar, hall light on, and an hour later, we're sitting downstairs watching The Equalizer, and all was good. The kids were definitely asleep, as I had to sneak past their room to use the bathroom once, and I had a quick peek on my way back. The little brother got a bit of a mini shoot snore going on, but apart from that, everything else was quiet. Back downstairs, we're watching TV a bit more, and about 20 minutes go by, and just out of nowhere, we hear banging, like really heavy banging. The kids scream immediately, and I run upstairs and meet the kids as they're running out of the room, and then there's another bang and another one. This time, I have eyes on the kids, so I know that they're not making the noise as well. The kids fly at me, and I grab the little brother and we rush downstairs and run into the front room to shut the door and all crash onto the sofa. Everything is silent apart from TV, which I switch off, and we sat in silence for about 5 minutes, just sort of holding each other and listening. After a few minutes, the girl with tears in her eyes just says in a matter-of-fact way, the man was angry because I wasn't in my own room, so he tried to push over a wardrobe and then started dumping the wall. This event has stayed with me all these years.